I'm Ted Berg for SNY.TV, and today on Know Your Enemy, we look at the Mets' next opponent. Calling into the studio is Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman from CSNWashington.com. Mark, how are you?
Doing good today, Ted. How are you?
Good. The Nats off to a pretty solid start, but it looks like their offense is being carried by just a couple of guys.
Yeah, it's surprising. They went 2-1 over the weekend in Chicago, but they're not hitting at all. And really the only guys who are Adam LaRoche, the guy who missed most of last season with a shoulder injury. All of a sudden he's hit 2 home runs in his first 3 games. And Ian Desmond, who was one of their weaker offensive players last year, they had him in the leadoff spot, and he's gotten off to a great start for them with 5 hits in 3 days. They're going to need some more guys to come around eventually. They can't just count on that. And they certainly can't count on just scoring runs late, because all their offense has come in the 8th and 9th innings. They've barely done anything in innings 1 through 7, so they can't keep counting on that to happen over the long term.
You mentioned LaRoche missing a lot of the spring. Is Desmond's hot streak carried over from spring training?
Yeah, he actually was hitting pretty well over the second half of camp, and so they were really encouraged about that. Here's a guy who has shown flashes, obviously, in the past, but offensively, he just never found his groove last year. He finally, at the end of the year, when they moved him up to the leadoff spot, started to hit better, got on base better. But there were some concerns about him coming into this season because he's a career 300 on-base percentage, and if you're going to have him hit leadoff, obviously you can't have that kind of numbers. But Davey Johnson's been a big supporter of his all along, and so far, it's only 3 games, but so far he's making it look good.
Now, they've got one of their best offensive weapons on the disabled list in Michael Morse. When he comes back, where does he fit into this lineup, and how does their outfield picture shake up when he does?
Well, he'll fit right back in the cleanup spot. They're really itching to get him back because he led the team 31 homers, 95 RBIs, and hit 300 for them last year. He's eligible to come off the DL as soon as Tuesday. He's still on rehab at AA, so I think they want to wait and see how he does today and see how that goes before they make that decision. But they feel like he is going to step right in and hopefully pick up where he left off last year. He'll be in left field, so that's going to bump probably Mark DeRosa back to the bench. And then Rick Ankiel, the other outfielder on the DL, is eligible to come back on Saturday from his injury. He goes back into center field when he comes back, and now you've got some question marks as far as Roger Bernardina, Brett Carroll, and a few other guys that are coming off their bench. They have to figure out who's going to get the short straw there.
I want to get to the pitching in a second, but if by some chance, Bryce Harper bangs down the door from AAA, who gets the short straw in the outfield then?
Well, it'll be whoever's in center field, and that's probably Ankiel. It was interesting all spring they talked about Harper being a right fielder and that they were going to have Jason Worth in center. And then right as they sent Harper down with a few weeks to go in camp, they announced that he'd be playing center field at AAA, and that's where he's been mostly so far. I think they'd like to believe that he can hold down that position at least early in his career, maybe not in the long term. But I think they also look at the makeup of their outfield. They already have Morse left, and Worth is really better off in right field. So they're kind of hoping that Harper's athleticism will work in center field. He still has a lot to learn there because he hasn't really played it much, but that's their hope.
Edwin Jackson gets his start tonight. He's a guy I imagine most Mets fans have seen before, but what can we expect out of him?
Well, you can expect great stuff. He's always had a live arm and the ability to do, throw a no-hitter on any given night, and he's done that in his career. The problem is you never know exactly what you're going to get because he falls behind hitters. He'll use up a lot of pitches early in the game, and his pitch count can rise. He did not have a very good spring, and I think that was one thing that was a little bit concerning to the Nats because they're going to win this year, if they do win, built on their starting rotation. It's really good and really deep. Jackson was the one guy that didn't quite live up to that this spring. So the key to see is, can he get ahead of hitters early in the count, or is he falling behind 1-0, 2-0, and that's when he gets into trouble.
Ross Detwiler surprised some people, I think, by edging out John Lannon for a rotation spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Not that there was anything against Detwiler, who's always had a good arm and they've always wanted to get a good look at, but given the overcrowded rotation they had, Davey Johnson said with about a week to go in spring training that John Lannon was his 5th starter, and then all of a sudden decided to change his mind. Now Lannon gets sent down to AAA even though he's making $5 million and led the team in wins, had an ERA under 4 last year. But they really want to get a look once and for all at Detwiler. He was a number 1 pick in 2007. We've seen glimpses of what he can be. He was pretty good down the stretch last year. once and for all, they want to put him out there and see what he can do if he's in the rotation in the long term.
And what will we see out of him? I know he's a lefty. Give us a brief scouting report.
Well, he's a lefty. You can get it up to 95 miles an hour, and that's a pretty rare commodity, and I think that's another reason why they want to see him. He's a tall, skinny guy. Doesn't look like he should have that kind of power arm, but he does. In his case, the issue has always been, can he get deep enough in the games? He's been very good for 4 innings, 5 innings often. The question has been, once he gets to the third time around the lineup, can he continue to get guys out? So can he make it to the 6th and ultimately the 7th inning?
And finally, the marquee matchup in this series, Wednesday, day game, Steven Strasburg and Johan Santana. Is Strasburg, are the leashes off now? Is it everything good to go?
Well, it is everything good to go with a little bit of a caveat, and that is that they are monitoring his innings this year and his pitch count. They say they're going to shut him down at about 160 innings, so that's going to be sometime in September. Now, Davey Johnson isn't necessarily going to manage with that in mind now. If Strasburg is pitching well, he's efficient, his pitch count isn't getting up too much above 100, he'll let him go. But it's interesting that Strasburg, knowing all this, and one of the big things that he really worked on in his rehab from Tommy John surgery was becoming more efficient as a pitcher. As great as those 14 strikeouts were in his big league debut, he would much rather now get outs quicker and allow him to go deeper into games. So I think you're going to see the strikeout numbers come down some as he works more to get ahead early, get some ground balls early. But in doing so, that may allow him to get to the 7th inning more often, something we didn't really see from him as a rookie.
And is the stuff where it was before the surgery?
Yeah, the stuff is absolutely back. He'll dial it up into the upper 90s. I'm not sure I've seen him hit 100 quite yet, but I think that's in part because he's not trying to. Like I said, he's found that 100 miles an hour down the middle, they can still hit that in the big league. But if you put it at 96, 97 and have some downward movement on it, it's almost impossible. He's trying to take a cue from guys like Roy Halladay, Justin Verlander, those other big power arms that are kind of comparable to him. He wants to use his whole arsenal, but the curveball is all the way back to where it was. It's devastating. The changeup that still hits 90 miles an hour, it's really something to see when you watch him out there.
Mark, thanks so much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Remember, for all the latest Mets coverage, be sure to check in at MetsBlog.com, TedQuarters.net, and SNY.TV.